All right, welcome to today's deep dive, where we're going to completely break down the intricate bid assembly process. We're going to reveal exactly how construction projects are accurately priced so you can actually win work. And more importantly, how to avoid massive financial losses. Because let's face it, construction is a remarkably high-stakes game. A single miscalculation, that can literally be the difference between a highly profitable year and having to close your doors for good. So today, we're getting into the exact anatomy of a winning bid.
Look, historically, the construction industry has just bled millions of dollars due to chaotic technology and a real lack of true structure. We've seen this massive rush toward what vendors love to call artificial intelligence. But honestly, a lot of times these are just fragile, interpretive information aggregators. They don't actually build your bid. To stop wasting time and money on tech that underperforms, you don't need some magic algorithm. You need a highly organized, foolproof framework.
So, what's the actual fix? It's the estimating manager's bid assembly. Think of this as the mastermind methodology behind building a winning bid without burning through time or capital. It's a meticulous, sequential framework used to define, cost, price, and ultimately evaluate complex construction projects. Basically, it takes the sheer chaos of raw data and transforms it into a fiercely protected budget and a clear-cut strategy. Here is our roadmap for how this process works. First, defining scope and items. Second, assigning the bid team. Third, the cost assembly phase. Fourth, pricing, risk, and markup. And finally, evaluating bid results. Let's get right into it. Starting off with Section 1, defining scope and items. This is your foundation. When we look at the overarching lifecycle of a bid, it really breaks down into 6 major steps. But right now, we are firmly planted in step 1, laying the foundation by scoping out the work. You simply cannot price a project if you don't know the exact boundaries of what you're doing. If you rush this step, every single number you calculate after this is going to be fundamentally flawed. And scoping is way more than just glancing at a blueprint or a site plan, you know? It requires digging deep into the material specs. What exactly are we building with here? You've got to look at geographical concerns, too. I mean, building on a steep mountainside completely changes your logistics compared to building on a flat, empty lot. We also have to figure out subcontractor availability and ultimately match the project's estimated duration with our available resources. Asking the tough question, are we actually equipped to take this on right now? Then we move into the pay items phase, and this is critical. You have to contrast the owner-defined scope with your actual proposed scope. Because, let's be real, what the owner thinks they need versus what the physics of the project actually demand, often two entirely different things. Identifying those gaps early on allows the estimating manager to establish incredibly accurate conceptual pricing way before the heavy lifting even begins. All right, Section 2, assigning the bid team. Time to rally the troops. Now that the scope is locked in, you have to realize a bid of this magnitude is never a solo endeavor. It takes a highly coordinated strike force. The estimating manager makes sure everyone knows their exact role by making precise scope assignments. They hand out procurement duties, deciding who's going to chase down the best material prices. And they clearly identify the sources for quantity takeoffs. Without this kind of rigid delegation, you just get overlapping work, missed items, and total internal chaos. Moving on to Section 3, the cost assembly phase. Gathering all the pieces. Think about the sheer volume of data funneling in at the stage. If scoping was drawing the blueprint, cost assembly is literally bringing in the cranes and raw materials. The team is just rapid firing through detailed time and resource estimates, locking in vendors and subs. And it doesn't stop at physical materials. They're calculating complex job indirect costs, bonds, taxes, permitting fees, and even projecting future cost escalations. Literally every single penny it takes to physically execute the job is assembled right here. And that brings us to the main event, Section 4. Pricing, risk, and markup, the climax of the bid. So you have your raw costs, right? But your raw costs are definitely not your final bid. This is where the tension lies in literally every construction company on Earth. How in the world do we calculate a final price that keeps us fiercely competitive without exposing the company to disastrous financial liabilities? Bid too high, you lose the job. Bid too low, well, you win the job, but you might bankrupt the company. Nobody wants that. The solution to managing that massive tension lies in 3 main pillars of pricing. It's this constant push and pull between our risk assessments, our necessary markup factors, and the final balancing of the numbers. Let's actually unpack these one by one to see how that final number is truly born. First up, we've got to face the music with risk assessment. You have to look at the company's current backlog. Are we desperate for work and willing to bid cheek? Or are we already stretched way too thin and need a serious premium to even consider taking this on? We also have to evaluate hidden environmental risks, the reputation of the owner, our own cash flow, and supplier reliability, because every single risk you identify here directly dictates how you protect yourself in the next step. Once you know those risks, you apply your markup factors. This is how you find that sweet spot, that perfect competitive price that ensures the lights actually stay on at headquarters. We factor in home office overhead, our desired net margin, and those risk contingencies we just talked about. But we also have to look outward, right? What is the current market saturation? Who is our competition? We also look at value engineering. Are there smarter, cheaper ways to execute this design that give us an edge? And lastly, the pricing must be balanced. You can't just slap a blanket 15% margin on a project and call it a day. The estimating manager reviews the sequence of work to ensure cash flow integrity, meaning, will this project actually fund itself as it progresses, or are we going to be dangerously out of pocket? They check for contractual restrictions like value caps and weigh the final numbers against historical industry pricing just to make absolutely sure it makes sense in the real world. Finally, we reach Section 5, evaluating bid results. Win or lose, the job isn't done. This concept from the framework is absolutely non-negotiable. A postmortem review has to happen regardless of whether you won or lost. You want to do a deep bid tab review. That means a line-by-line comparison of exactly where your numbers fell against your competitors. Why did we lose? Were we too heavy on concrete? Or, hey, if we won, did we leave way too much money on the table? This data feeds directly into the next bid, making the whole team continuously sharper. Now, if you actually won the bid, congratulations. But the estimating manager's job pivots instantly to post-bid commitments. The second the award is pending, they are blasting out those vendor and sub-notifications. They are jumping straight into preliminary reviews about the schedule, the budget, and any anticipated roadblocks. They're aggressively reviewing the scope to get that final contract executed. Because ultimately, all of this meticulous data assembly, the scoping, the pricing, the risk balancing, it all culminates right here. The goal is to safely hand the keys over to the operations team with a crystal clear contract, identified risks, and a fiercely protected budget. They aren't walking into a surprise. They are walking into a finely tuned, battle-tested strategy. Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought. We started by talking about how the industry wastes millions on hyped-up tech that just fails to deliver. Now that you've seen the true anatomy of how a bid assembly actually works, you have to ask yourself, to protect your own capital, is your current bidding process a truly structured, intelligent methodology, or is it just a fragile, unorganized aggregator of information? Honestly, the difference between those two is exactly what determines who builds the future and who gets left behind.